Man finds a weird dog in his basement. When the vet examines it, he's shocked. Brian had always thought of his grandmother's home as a place full of memories, a quaint and quiet home tucked away at the edge of town. When she passed away, she left the home to him. It was old, creaky, and full of history, but it felt like the right place to start fresh. Moving in, Brian spent his days sorting through dusty boxes and uncovering relics of the past, old photographs, faded letters, and forgotten trinkets. It was a peaceful, if slightly melancholic routine. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, the house's quiet demeanor began to shift. At night, the house felt different, almost alive. It wasn't long before Brian noticed strange noises, soft shuffling sounds, faint scratches, and low, almost inaudible whimpers. He tried to brush it off as the house settled, the way old houses often do, but the noises persisted, growing more distinct each evening. They seemed to be coming from the basement, a part of the house Brian had avoided since moving in. It was dark and damp down there, a place where shadows lingered and the air felt thick with the weight of forgotten years. Welcome back to PlotTwister. Before we unravel today's mystery, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you're always in the loop. One evening, as the sounds grew louder, curiosity got the better of him. Grabbing a flashlight, Brian made his way to the basement door. The air was cool as he descended the creaky wooden steps, the beam of light trembling slightly in his hand. The noises stopped as soon as he reached the bottom, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed in around him. He scanned the room, the light cutting through the darkness, revealing nothing but old furniture covered in dust and cobwebs. But then in the far corner something moved, a quick, subtle shift in the shadows. Brian's heart raced as he focused his flashlight on the spot. There, huddled against the wall, was a creature. It looked like a dog, but something about it was off. Its fur was matted, its eyes unnaturally large and reflective in the light. It stared back at him, frozen, as if equally unsure of what to make of him. Brian's breath caught in its throat. This was no ordinary dog. The realization sent a shiver down his spine as he tried to process what he was seeing. Brian stood frozen in the basement, his flashlight locked on the creature in the corner. The air felt thick, charged with an uneasy tension. He took a slow, cautious step forward, the beam of light quivering slightly as it illuminated the strange figure before him. The creature didn't move. Its wide, glowing eyes fixed on him, reflecting the light in an almost eerie way. Its body was low to the ground, huddled as if it was trying to make itself smaller, less noticeable. Brian's mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The creature had the basic shape of a dog, 4 legs, fur, and a tail, but its features were strange, almost distorted. Its fur was rough and matted, sticking out its odd angles, and its limbs seemed longer than they should be, giving it an awkward, almost unnatural posture. The eyes, though, were what really unnerved him. They were too large, too bright, almost like they didn't belong to a creature of this world. Heart-pounding, Brian spoke softly, trying to calm both himself and the creature. He reached out a hand, palm up, trying to show he meant no harm. The creature flinched but didn't retreat, its gaze flicking between Brian and the shadow behind it. As if weighing its options, Brian could see it trembling, a subtle shiver that made its fur ripple. Whatever this thing was, it was scared, maybe even more scared than he was. Slowly, carefully, Brian lowered himself to the ground, crouching to make himself appear less threatening. He pulled out a granola bar from his pocket, the only thing he had on him, and gently tossed a piece toward the creature. It sniffed the air, cautiously inching forward just enough to grab the morsel before retreating back into the safety of the shadows. Brian stayed where he was, watching as the creature nibbled on the food. Its movements quick and jittery. He could see it more clearly now. There was something almost familiar about it, like a memory just out of reach. But the strangeness of it all kept him on edge. He knew he couldn't just leave it down here, not like this. The creature, though odd and unsettling, didn't seem aggressive. It seemed alone, lost, and in need of help. Brian wasn't sure what he was dealing with, but he knew one thing: this was just the beginning. Brian knew he couldn't leave the creature alone in the basement, but the idea of handling it himself felt overwhelming. He carefully approached it, speaking in soothing tones, trying to project calm, even though his nerves were frayed. The creature watched him with those unnerving eyes, but it didn't shy away this time. It seemed to sense that Brian wasn't a threat. He found an old pet carrier in the basement, dusty and tucked away in a corner. It was large enough, but getting the creature inside was a delicate process. Slowly, he coaxed it with more bits of food, leading it closer to the carrier. His heart pounded as the creature hesitated at the entrance, sniffing the air warily. With one last gentle nudge, it stepped inside, and Brian quickly but carefully closed the door. The creature didn't panic. Instead, it settled down in the back, eyes still locked on him. But there was a hint of trust there now. With the creature secured, Brian knew he needed help. This wasn't something he could figure out on his own. He carried the pet carrier up the basement stairs, each step feeling heavier with the weight of the unknown. He placed the carrier in the back seat of his car, making sure it was secure before driving off to the only place he could think of, Dr. Emma's veterinary clinic. The drive felt longer than usual, the silence of the car thick with anticipation. Brian glanced in the rear-view mirror, catching glimpses of the creature as it shifted nervously in the carrier. It seemed calmer now, but there was still that air of unease, like it was caught between fear and curiosity. When he arrived at the clinic, Dr. Emma greeted him with a warm smile that quickly faded into concern as she saw the look on Brian's face. He explained the situation as best he could, trying to put into words the strangeness of it all. Dr. Emma listened intently, her brow furrowed with thought. She was used to dealing with all sorts of animals, but something about this had her intrigued. She led Brian into an examination room, her movements calm and practiced, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. Brian placed the carrier on the table and opened it slowly. The creature hesitated, then stepped out cautiously, its eyes darting around the unfamiliar room. Dr. Emma leaned in, her professional demeanor masking the surprise she clearly felt. This was unlike anything she had ever seen, and she began her examination. The tension in the room thickened. Something about this creature was deeply unusual, and they were both about to find out just how unusual it truly was. Dr. Emma began her examination with the same steady hands she'd used on countless animals before, but the creature on the table was unlike anything she'd ever encountered. As she moved her stethoscope over its chest, she noticed how its breathing was irregular, almost too slow for a dog. Its fur was coarse and matted. But beneath that rough exterior, its muscles were unusually defined, as if it had spent its life surviving in the wild rather than in someone's home. She checked its teeth, which were sharp and slightly uneven, and then its eyes, those unnerving large eyes that seemed to follow her every movement. They weren't just reflecting the light, they were almost glowing, a faint luminescence that was unnatural in such a setting. Dr. Emma's unease grew as she worked, her mind racing through possibilities, but none of them fit. This creature wasn't just strange, it was entirely foreign, something that didn't belong in any category she knew. Brian watched anxiously from the side, his fingers tapping nervously on the edge of the examination table. He could tell by the way Dr. Emma was frowning that this wasn't a typical case. She took a deep breath, then began to collect samples, blood, hair, even a bit of saliva. As she worked, she murmured to herself, trying to piece together the puzzle that lay before her. When the initial tests came back, the only deepened the mystery. The creature's DNA was bizarre, with markers that didn't align with any known dog breeds. Dr. Emma stared at the results on her screen, her brow furrowed in confusion. She ran the tests again, double-checked her work, and the results were the same. This was something entirely new, or perhaps something ancient that had been forgotten. She moved on to a more thorough examination, scanning the creature's skeletal structure. The X-rays revealed even more anomalies. Its bones were thicker than normal, almost like they were built for something much larger. There were signs of old injuries, healed in ways that suggested a resilience far beyond that of any domesticated animal. As the minutes turned into hours, the clinic grew quiet. The only sounds, the soft hum of machines, and the occasional rustle from the creature as it shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Emma finished her tests and turned to Brian, her face pale but determined. Whatever this creature was, it was clear that it wasn't just an ordinary dog. Something far more unusual was at play here, and they were on the brink of discovering just how extraordinary it truly was. Dr. Emma stared at the results in front of her, the confusion on her face slowly turning into something else. Astonishment, maybe even a hint of fear. Brian watched her, his own anxiety mounting with each passing second. He could tell that whatever she had discovered was beyond anything she had expected. The room felt charged, the air thick with anticipation. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Emma finally looked up at Brian, her voice steady but tinged with something serious. She explained that the tests had revealed something extraordinary. The creature wasn't just any unusual dog, it was a hybrid of sorts, a mix of domesticated and something wild, something that shouldn't exist. The DNA had markers that linked it to a species thought to be long extinct, creatures that had lived in ancient forests surviving on the fringes of civilization. This was a living relic, a creature out of time, a blend of the familiar and the forgotten. As she spoke, Brian's mind raced, trying to grasp the implications. His grandmother had lived in this house for decades, and he began to wonder if she had known about this creature all along. Had she kept it hidden, protecting it somehow? The idea seemed crazy, but then again, nothing about this situation was normal. Dr. Emma continued explaining that such creatures were believed to be myths, stories told by old hunters and passed down through generations. But here it was, real and breathing, sitting right in front of them. The creature, sensing the shift in the room, looked up at Brian with those glowing eyes, and in that moment he felt a strange connection, as if this odd being had somehow chosen him. The revelation hit hard. This was not just an animal. It was a part of something much larger, something that tied back to a time before people like Brian had settled in these lands. Dr. Emma suggested contacting a wildlife sanctuary that specialized in rare and endangered species. They would know how to care for it, how to ensure it would be safe. Relief washed over Brian as he realized this was the right thing to do. He nodded, agreeing to let the sanctuary take over. In the days that followed, the creature was safely relocated, and Brian found himself visiting the sanctuary often, watching the creature thrive in its new environment. He couldn't help but feel that his grandmother had somehow left him this strange, wonderful responsibility, one that connected him to a world far older and wilder than he had ever imagined. What are your thoughts on the twist we uncovered today? Comment your ideas below. Make sure to like and subscribe for a daily dose of drama and mystery. See you later with another twist.